guard position. Now, he's going to obviously handle the ball when he needs to handle the ball, but when you're still getting younger and guys can run up and down the floor and play minutes without being tired and having to come out or check out or being banged up or bruised and things like that, that helps your team significantly. Isn't it? They didn't even, sometimes, like, for instance, the Clippers, they lost coaches off the staff. The Lakers didn't lose coaches. None of their coaches are still there. It's the same. They're repeating the same thing with better players.
I mean, look, the reason why I said Portland gets Robert Covington, guy that can shoot the ball. You combine him with Dame and CJ. It's a really good backcourt. That's unique, right? They always had to side with Yusuf Nurkic. Zach Collins got hurt last year. He was averaging big time money, big time points per game, inside and out. Can knock down a mid-range jump shot. So I think now you get Enes Kanter, comes back, gives them size to kind of combat that size that the Lakers have to a degree.
Resurgence of Melo.
Yep, Melo played extremely well. He just signed another deal there as well. I mean, but look at the rest of the teams. When you think about, let's just go to the Western Conference. I mean, the Clippers didn't really make any moves in free agency. We'll get into later about what Paul George said about Doc Rivers and the scheme that they were running offensively. Okay, Denver Nuggets, they'll be there. But still, people are wondering about, can Jamal Murray sustain that type of play the whole year? He did it in the bubble. They looked incredible in the bubble. But can he do it the whole year? Houston Rockets, they got John Wall, but they still have a lot of questions.
John Wall.
Okay.
And a potential exit for Harden. We've seen Westbrook
OKC is
already.
rebuilding. I mean, they have draft picks out the Yang. Or Utah will be there. Dallas will be there. Phoenix will be there. Okay. Like it's the Lakers. Portland's kind of there because I like what they've done, and everybody else is kind of like right there beneath them. It's the Lakers to lose this year, guys. Let's be real about it. It's the Lakers to lose when it's all said and done this year.
You mentioned the Clippers, and I just want to kind of pay off what you had said for viewers and listeners that didn't get the gist of this from Paul George. You kind of mentioned he was a little bitter after their playoff loss when they were up 3-1 to Denver. He was on the All the Smoke podcast and essentially said of Doc Rivers, now obviously we know Ty Lue is there. Jay, you mentioned this, quote, "This is all Paul George. We lost, but during that whole process, we never worked on adjustments. We never worked on what to do differently. We just literally having the same blank happen over and over again. It started to play a trick on you like, man, what's going on?" So they run it back, obviously, with Paul, with Kawhi, with the coach that I think a lot of people would have loved to have hired this offseason. I know you said they made no moves, but considering Key has always said, and you've said even just weeks ago, before the Lakers made all the moves, you still would like to see the Lakers run through somebody like the Clippers with the way that they have ascended. Where do you see LA right now within hearing these particular comments, knowing the guy that was in charge of these, the lack of adjustments, he's out?
Well, I mean, we talked about that. He remember when we were going through this whole thing about the Clippers, and I was like, man, this feels like a coup. It feels like somebody internally just didn't want Doc Rivers to be there, right? We were wondering, look, whenever a guy like Doc Rivers is removed from a team, regardless if they didn't meet expectations, that's coming from the best players to a degree, right? I mean, Steve Ballmer can say, hey, I want to fire Doc Rivers, but at the end of the day, Steve Ballmer has to consult, not that he has to consult, that's the wrong choice of word. He has to communicate that to Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, if those guys are your best players and they own the keys to your franchise. That's why I said, it's because of them that he's no longer there too. And Paul George is just kind of reiterating that by saying, hey, they're trying to use me like a Ray Allen. They're trying to use me like a JJ Redick, pin downs, coming off screens. His game is way more diverse than that. You can use him, back against the basket, posting up in pick and roll scenarios because he can do that all. The question is, though, losing Montrezl Harrell really hurts them. And they just didn't add anything in free agency, and I think that hurts them ultimately.
Let me ask you this, Jason. Why say something now that Doc Rivers is gone?
Because he is gone.
Why not address it at the time that it's happening with Doc Rivers at halftime and stuff like that? Why not address it then?
That's why we were talking about this before, Key, where I was like, man, I wish a guy like CP3 was on this team. Mm-hmm. Because, and I don't know this for a fact, maybe it was addressed, but Kawhi doesn't really talk a lot, right? That's never been his thing. He hasn't been as communicative. He's a quiet leader. What I've seen by Paul, what he said in this whole thing is that, hey, we were up 3-1. Then we lost. It was 3-2. And we're like, all right, we'll be fine. Then it was 3-3. We're like, all right, we'll be fine. We still won one game. And it was, all of a sudden, well, we need to make some changes. Somebody in the locker room needs to be like, no, Doc, we need to make changes. Somebody needs to stand up and say that. And I think ultimately their lack of leadership and nobody to address that with Doc is ultimately what led to their demise.
So when you're up 3-1 and a team runs off 3 straight victories to get you, in that entire stretch, you mean to tell me that the coaching staff, as well as Patrick Beverly, I'll just use him as an example, didn't address the lack of adjustments? Is that and I didn't play. I've never been in an NBA locker room as a player, so I don't know how that would go over. I know in an NFL locker room, if the adjustments aren't being made, we're certainly going to let the coaches know, like, yo, this dude is playing me this way. We need to go to this. This ain't working. What are y'all doing? And so it's hearing you or listening to Paul George talk about the lack of adjustments from a veteran coach who's won a championship and veteran players that are on teams and guys like Sam Cassell who's on the bench and Ty Lue who's there, just let that just go?
No, you're right. I mean, look, it's his word. Nobody else is really saying anything.
No, I'm not questioning his word. I'm just saying it's like it's I guess it's baffling and mind-boggling to a degree, right? You would think that veteran players that have won championships, whether Kawhi doesn't, you don't need to scream loud to say, hey, Jay, man, we need to make some adjustments, dog.
Look, you bring up a valid point. I wasn't in the locker room. I don't know what happened. This is Paul George saying these words. I would find it shocking that a guy like Doc Rivers, Ty Lue, Sam Cassell wouldn't make those adjustments.
Yeah, or even be able to see why we are losing these games or why the first half is going one way or the third quarter is going one way and not be able to make the adjustments.
But there was a part of what Paul George said, though, that I got because we all felt this way. And if we felt this way, I'm sure internally inside their organization, they felt this way. You didn't think Denver was really going to beat the Clippers.
No, I didn't.
Right? Nobody thought that. You're like, all right, it's a matter of time before Kawhi turns it on. It's a matter of time before PG. Oh, Lou Will, he dropping buckets on people. Montrez, it's a matter of time. So I think that was maybe also a part of the problem, that they never thought it could actually happen. They didn't have that sense of urgency. They didn't have that dog in them as much as they thought they did.
But when it gets to 3-2, it's uh-oh. I'm right? I mean, it should be.
You would think.
Yeah, it should be like a uh-oh. Like, wait a minute, man, this ain't right. You know, that's kind of in football, because you don't play a whole series. You get basically your series is your quarter. And you look up in your first and second quarter, you kicking butt. Your third quarter comes, somebody making a comeback. Now all of a sudden you go, yo, we need to change this in the fourth quarter.
All I'm going to say is every time Kawhi Leonard has won a championship, he's been the guy that got finals MVP multiple times, but he hasn't been the leader of the team. Like Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, leaders of the San Antonio Spurs.
That would be a good player, Tony Robinson.
Tony Robinson, leader. He's a guy I actually competed against in high school. He went to UConn and I didn't. Anyway, funny how you remember things like that. T. Robinson, respect to you. But he wasn't the guy in San Antonio, right? Like leadership-wise, that was Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan. Then you go to Toronto, like that was Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry is the leader of that team. Fred VanVleet, tough guy as well. He made big shots, but like communicative-wise, leadership-wise, that was him. And now you come to the Clippers, like who is that guy? Like who was the guy grabbing people in the huddle saying, nah, you ain't going to do it this way?
So who's the leader now?
That's always been a question. That's why I thought they needed a guy like CP3. I still don't know who the leader of the Clippers are right now.
Is the voice, scratch that.
Ty Lue.
Scratch that. Is the leader Ty Lue and the voice Ty Lue now?
It has to be. I mean, unless Paul George continues to step up and say, this is my team. Yeah. I don't know, understanding personality traits, who the leader is in the locker room. I see how Pat Bev talks to everybody, but I don't know. Does he lead them?
He annoys me. I like him.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I know Dame leads the Portland Trailblazers. I know LeBron leads the Lakers. I know Jamal Murray and Jokic lead the Denver Nuggets. I don't know who leads the Los Angeles Clippers.
I would love to play with Patrick Beverly, just not against him because he would make me mad.
Two quick things I would just mention just from the fan perspective. I would never think it would be Paul George's team as long as Kawhi Leonard is on the roster. That's just from a fan perspective. And also, this is a Waterloo season for the Clippers. Remember, if this thing doesn't work out, it doesn't blow up, these guys can just walk out the door, and everything the Clippers did to acquire these two guys, it could be over at the end of next
you say
season.
that because Kawhi Leonard's the best player.
Indeed.
Right? The best player always isn't the leader.
Fair enough.
But the top players, like LeBron is the leader. Dame is the leader. Like certain other guys are the leader. I'm not sure. I think that's still a question mark about Kawhi.
Very fair.
Kawhi could join the Lakers, man. We ain't, we'll take him.
Keys tampering. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. All right. So speaking of leaders, who is the leader in the clubhouse for our poll question this morning? You can answer in any way you want. Essentially, we're just asking you, fellas, what's the best running back, wide receiver,